Then, as you rightly said, even the code that they use was not a very secure one. So you are involved in a plot, you write about it in a code which is not very safe. This shows that she was less careful at the time and more desperate, probably.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast. This is the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
If you follow the show on social media, you likely saw within the last week a big announcement about some lost Mary Queen of Scots letters. Well, on today's show, historian and friend of the show, Mell Taylor, had the privilege of talking to Dr. George Lasry, who together with his colleagues Norbert Bierman, a professor of music and a pianist, and Satoshi Tomokiyo, an astrophysicist, found and analyzed letters written by Mary Queen of Scots in code between the years 1578 and 1584. Now, despite Walsingham's network of spies and back channels determined to expose Mary Stuart's information network, Mary's clandestine letters to Castelnau remained undiscovered for 10 years. It was not until 1583 that Walsingham managed to plant a mole in Castelnau's embassy in London. These letters have been presumed lost for 436 years, until now. And now I turn it over to Mell Taylor and Dr. George Lasry.
Welcome to Tudors Dynasty. I've spent some fantastic time delving into your paper over the last few days, and also your PowerPoint presentation, which I found very useful. And how was it that the three of you and Professor Bierman and your lovely astrophysicist Satoshi, is it Tomokiyo?
Yes,
how did you stumble on these lost letters?
Yeah, so it's a project. I mean, the multiple project with the same purpose that we are involved in the last something like 10 years. So basically, what we do, we go to archive, or mainly we go to online connection of archives, and then we look for document in ciphers. So it doesn't have to be from a specific person. We just look for ciphers wherever we can find them, and our passion is also to crack them. So
right.
Sometimes you know who wrote them, to whom they were written. Sometimes you don't, and you have to crack the cipher in order to find that out. But in that specific case, those ciphers were in collections in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the French Library, and they were not properly tagged. So someone looking for material about Mary Stuart would not go to that specific collection to look for that.
Now, I found it quite amusing that whoever catalogued it in the first place looked at it, thought it was foreign, and said, "Oh, it must be Italian," which I thought, the French archivist clearly had a lot of work on his plate at the time.
We don't know exactly what happened. I think it's also a research question to understand why they were misplaced. What is interesting is that there are multiple collections, but in one of them, then the letter in code are actually interspersed together with letters in Italian. So you have one letter in Italian and one letter in code. So I think the archivist at the time thought that the code is the encoded version of that other letter in Italian. So this is very strange, and this is also explain also why the whole collection, if you look at the catalog, it's the say Italian matters, and it also say the first half of the 16th century, and we know that Mary Stuart was active in the second half of the 16th century.
All of that I find is a complete fabulous story in itself, let alone the insight that you're going to produce, you're giving to the rest of the world on Mary Stuart's life and correspondence. Why do you think you've answered the next question, really, haven't you? That, why they've not been found is because the language and the way that they were archived. But when you began cross-referencing the known letters transcribed by Prince Labanov in the 19th century and the few pieces found in the 20th century, how soon was it before you realized that it was Mary Stuart?
Well, it took a while, because this particular cipher is not, I mean, this is not the most complex one we saw or solved, but it's definitely a complex one. So solving the cipher was actually like peeling an onion, that you have multiple layers in that onion, and you have to peel the layers one by one. So at the beginning, when we started to crack the code, we had fragments. We could read maybe about 20-30% of the text, and very quickly we realized that was not in Italian, that was in French. And then we were able to read a little bit more of the text, maybe 30%, 40%, and we saw some fragments that are more significant, and first realized that the language was not only French, but it was in feminine form. So a woman was writing that. So that was even more intriguing. And then we saw some expressions which are quite revealing, like ma liberté, which means my liberty. And there is no reason someone would write about his liberty if he's free. So it was probably someone in captivity. And then we saw mon fils, which is my son. So these were already a combination quite suspicious, and Mary Stuart started to be one of our suspects, but we were not sure yet. And especially, we could not believe that a trio of Codebreakers, by chance, we will reveal something that scholars have been looking for centuries. We couldn't have that luck. It was too crazy. So we continued to dig, and then we peeled another layer of that onion. And then I would say that the smoking gun was when we saw the word Walsingham. And of course, everyone familiar with the Tudor Dynasty know who Sir Francis Walsingham is.
Yes.
The famous first secretary and spy master of Queen Elizabeth. And when we saw that, all those clues, it made it quite evident that this is Mary Stuart, even for that was a complete surprise and a shock, I would say, for us.
When I looked on the Taylor and Francis website, that this first appeared in the Cryptology magazine in July 2020.
No, not at all. I mean,
no. So it wasn't a pandemic project or anything.
No, I wouldn't say that. The timing of the project, we started to look at the material early 2022. We submitted the paper end of 2022. So you could say that part of it was during the pandemic, but it was not a purely pandemic project.
Oh, right.
No.
Right. No, it was just something I spotted on the Taylor and Francis website, and I thought, oh, that seems a bit strange. It's sat there for 3 years. Why has it? But that's not the case.
No, not at all. And actually, one of the concerns that we had is that we cannot sit too long on such material. So this is why we had a crash program to publish, to prepare the paper and publish it quickly, because this cannot be. You can't hide that for too long.
No. Have you spoken to Professor Guy?
Yes, I mean, I've been in contact with him, not voice contact, but he's been delighted, very enthusiastic, and also for us, it's a kind of validation that what we did is meaningful, and it seems to be for him and for other scholars that are contacting us much more than meaningful. It seems to be a real goldmine of new primary information, and usually historians want primary material.
Yes, we're all on the hunt for that. So yes, how many absolutely new letters are there?
So when we saw that combination and then the contents, then we were pretty much convinced, but then we didn't have the full proof. I mean, I was a courtroom evidence to do that. So what we did, and also we had another concern is, maybe those letters actually are known and some copies of them exist not in code in other places. Because if you just redecipher something which exists in other archives or in a book or publication, that's not such a big deal.
No.
What we did, we combed archives again and again to see if we could find those letters that are not in Labanov, in Count Labanov a collection of Mary Stuart, and they are not in other collections that were assembled more recently. So at the end of the day, we have 57 letters. 8 of them actually are in existing collection, most of them in the British Library. That was the final proof that this is from Mary Stuart, because we have the code and the plain text side by side, and they match very well. So that was a strong validation about their origin. And then when we were in contact with Professor John Guy, he confirmed that those letters are new and very significant.
That must have been a really exciting moment for all of you.
Exactly. That was fun. That was really something surreal. Like, the only analogy that I can find is some archaeologist digging the ground and looking for some, in the best case, some pottery or some small find, and then finding a big a book or some tablets with cuneiform form or something like that. That was really a fantastic moment and feeling.
When I saw the paper, for me, I thought, I wonder if Dr. Lasry and his companions felt as though they were like Howard Carter coming along the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922.
I'm sorry,
such a discovery.
I wouldn't even barely compare the two. What we
I don't know. I think Elizabethan scholars might disagree there.
No, I'm not. I don't think so, because basically, this was a treasure more or less laying in plain sight.
Right.
So we did not discover it. We did not discover the physical copies of those letters. We just attributed them to the right person and then highlighted their importance. So it's a little different. It's a pure code breaking exercise, and this is what we do. I mean, we break a lot of codes. This is not the first code that we break. We love breaking codes. It's a passion, and it's also an obsession. So whenever we see a code, if you like an encoded message in front of us, literally we won't go to sleep until we solve it.
Wow.
So it's a code breaking achievement rather than a discovery achievement.
Right. That's my romantic ideals. When you're code breaking, you must get a tremendous feel for the individual who's using this code. Did this give you a new sense of Mary and how she was?
Yeah, so first of all, when you say a new sense of Mary, then you assume that there was a sense of Mary, and I barely knew.
Yeah, that is.
I barely knew the highlights of her history, because I mean, as a cryptographer, we know something about the history of Mary, because our downfall was caused by another cipher that she sent to Babington 2 or 3 years after those letters that we have deciphered. They are from 1578 to 1584. The Babington plot is 2 years later, and her execution is 3 years later. So in the Babington plot, she sent a letter in code to Babington, and this letter was intercepted and decoded. And then in that letter, there was some incriminating evidence that she was plotting against the queen. So her story, in conjunction with cryptography and codes, is well known, and this is where we know the word Walsingham. But we are not historians. We don't. I mean, no. I love history. I read plenty of books about history, but I don't claim to be an historian. And so the first thing that we needed to do when we realized it was her is actually to read more and more and to get more familiar with the story, because otherwise it's very difficult to interpret the letter and to decipher it, to know that this is the word and this is the next word. So this is what we did. We read quite a few books. So right now we have a better feeling who she was, but from time to time, historians, I sent some fragment of the text to historian, and they say, yes, oh wow, we can hear this and this and this, and I say, okay, I didn't read that because I'm not a historian. So for us it was new. It was new because we were not so familiar with Mary Stuart. It's not like you're probably being familiar with her story for a long time.
Yes, she's not one I've studied in a huge amount of depth, but we know that she was with the Earl of Shrewsbury for a number of years, and those letters seem to span the time that she was with the Earl of Shrewsbury.
Yes, but not all of it. I don't remember the exact year when she was moved to him, but it was early on, and we have 6 years of correspondence. And I think she was with him 15 years plus minus.
Yeah.
But those years are particularly interesting because they are dense with events, political machinations, things that she's trying to do with her allies against her enemy, and so on. So this is a very interesting period.
Yeah. Oh, also, she's complaining about her health and how she's lack of exercise. What I found really interesting was that she asks permission for her own physician to be given a passport because she doesn't trust those who are being sent to her. And in fact, one of them has made her drink gold water. Is that water
Yes,
with
yes.
gold in it?
Yes, but that was conventional. At the time, it was a conventional treatment if you wanted an alchemist to treat your illness.
I wondered if it was sort of really gold, and I'm thinking, gosh, is that because she's a queen, or is it?
No, it was water with gold. I mean, not too much gold in it, but it
Just
was actually
enough.
physically gold. Yes.
Gosh, heavens. And it also demonstrates how she's managing her property in France as well.
She's trying her best because she's away and she can manage her property only via her envoys and officers in France. But and by the way, she all the time complains that she has been robbed of some property, and now she's left with only half of what she owned originally. So she uses that communication basically. Just to give a broader perspective, the letters are from Mary to Michel de Castelnau, the French ambassador. Yes, exactly. And he uses she uses this channel also to send letters to her agent and officers in Paris. So we know that she had an ambassador in Paris.
Is that Mr. Beaton?
Beaton, yes, exactly. And then she had her primary agent and intriguer was Thomas Morgan, the famous Thomas Morgan. And she sent quite a few letters to them via Castelnau. So unfortunately, we don't have those letters. They did not survive. All we have are the letters to Castelnau. We know that they were written with another type of code because she didn't want Castelnau to read what she was writing to Beaton and to Thomas Morgan and the rest. But we know that she used that channel to get letters to them and from them.
Who actually devised the cipher? Was it Mary herself?
We don't know. So this is, I think this is an open research question, and we'll be happy to partner with scholars to find out. But this type of cipher was not unusual at the time. I'm not going to get into the small detail, but it was what we call a homophonic cipher with a nomenclature or a dictionary. It was not unusual. That was the common way of writing in cipher. But we don't know who designed the specific cipher. So she was very familiar with cipher. She used cipher throughout her life. She was taught about cipher as a young child by her mother, Marie de Guise. And she knew how to write and to read in cipher, actually, but we don't think she actually did the encipherment. We think that she wrote the text in French, and then the secretary did the encoding for her.
Oh, right.
We don't know who prepared this what we call a cipher sheet or encoding table that you use to encode and when you receive the letter to decode.
Your discoveries date from May 1578, and in the first letter, Mary tells us she hasn't received any correspondence for the last 7 months, which sort of suggests that there was this covert channel was well established by 1578, long before that date. And the common denominator seems to be that they all came, the exchange came from when she was with the Earl of Shrewsbury as a house guest. And she says he's a decent man, but there were rumors that she'd had an affair with him. I mean, that was Bess of Hardwick was saying.
Yes, of course. This is a very famous story, and in some of the letters, she strongly denies that any accusation of that sort. And what we can see that she more and more, I mean, we know that she was in good terms with Bess of Hardwick, but after a while in her letter, she's getting more and more negative towards her, and she writes that she is very close to Robert Dudley, the Earl of Gloucester, and they are planning plots against the Queen, against her. So her attitude towards Bess of Hardwick start to be more and more negative over time.
I'm fascinated by, her loathing of Dudley comes across in every time she mentions him. It sort of leaps off the page, that awful man Dudley. And it almost goes against everything that we know about Dudley's relationship with the Queen, with Elizabeth. I mean, she was supposed to be madly in love with him and he with her. I mean, these letters cover the period of the negotiations of the marriage with Anjou. And yet Mary Stuart seems to be well aware that Dudley has married Lady Leicester, even though he's Letitia Knollys, rather, Lady Devereux, long before the Queen ever finds out.
Yes, but Mary's relationship with Dudley, as far as I understand, were not always bad, because even early on, he was a potential candidate to marry Mary, Queen of Scots.
When Mary was married to the Dauphin, there's the rumor that Elizabeth is going to marry her horsemaster, which is not quite the same as her master of horse. It suggests that she's going to marry a groom. And I feel that Mary Stuart was making a particular slur against Dudley for some, and Elizabeth, because of Elizabeth's illegitimacy.
I can only refer to what I read in the letters. Okay, so I can't refer to what you just mentioned. But I can tell you, I know that the relationship between Mary and Dudley were not always bad, and
right.
there is some evidence in the letter that actually they might have been better at the beginning, but very quickly they start to be, everything she writes about him start to be quite negative, and she's trying also to use Castelnau to convey some rumors about Dudley, so that the Queen will be mad at him. But she's very specific and very cautious. She asks Castelnau, please don't tell the Queen this is coming from me.
Why do you think that Castelnau actually doesn't do that? And it's Jean de Simier who is the one who whispers in Elizabeth's ear about Dudley's secret marriage.
So we have a part of the other side of the story, because there are letters sent by Castelnau. We don't have any letters, by the way, sent from Castelnau to Mary.
Well, that's a shame.
We do have letters from Castelnau to the king and the Queen Mother in France. We know that some of he took very seriously the request from Mary Stuart, and he conveyed a lot of those requests to the king and the Queen Mother. We also know that he was not very sympathetic to conveying too much dirt. So sometimes Mary would insist that Castelnau ask the Queen to investigate something, and then he was trying to convince her not to do that. But he was quite sympathetic. It's not clear whether she was fully open with him, and there is evidence that at the same time she also had correspondence with the Spanish ambassador,
Mendoza.
Yes, and in those letters, and there are not too many that survive, but those that survive are quite interesting and sometimes even more revealing. But she trusted him and she relied on him, and her communication, her channel communication with him was critical to her, not just to communicate to the French king and the Queen Mother, but also to her network outside England.
Walsingham is obviously lurking in the background from all of this, and she actually warns Castelnau to be wary of Walsingham. She also asks him to find out who it was who's asked for the letters that she's sending by the official channel that she has, why these letters need to be opened in Privy Council. We don't know whether that was ever answered, do we?
Yeah, we know that she complains about that, but I think someone will need to look in that deeper.
Right.
But you have a lot of Walsingham is a star in her letters, and she's mentioned many times, and usually not positively. And she's also giving advice to Castelnau how to handle him, how to beware of him, and even we know now from other sources, and John Bossy has written a very interesting book on that, which is called Under the Molehill.
It's a fabulous book. Well,
it's a fabulous book, and then it details the evidence that Walsingham actually was able to recruit a mole in the French embassy, and that this mole made copies of all letters that Castelnau sent and received, and this includes, of course, letters from Mary. And by the way, this is the reason why we have 7 or 8 letters that we did decipher but do exist elsewhere. So in one of the letter, I think it was known before our decipherment that Mary warns Castelnau, you seem to have a spy in your embassy, and Castelnau, in another letter that we have, actually denies that and say, no, I mean, only 3 people are looking at those letters and I trust all of them. But unfortunately, one of them was probably the mole.
Was that Henri Fajot, Monsieur Fanon, and Courcelles?
None of them. I mean,
it's another one.
it's Ferron. I mean, he was identified by Bossy to be Ferron, and Fagot was a code name for someone else who recruited Ferron.
Right. Gosh, the plot thickens at every twist and turn.
And Courcelles, according to he was a secretary. According to John Bossy, was wrongly accused. I mean, by historian, because by the time he was accused, he was dead already. But he was wrongly accused to have been the mole, or the spy, but he was probably not.
Right.
He was even not present at some of the time that he was supposed to spy. He was even not present in London, so that there is enough evidence to say that it's not him.
That he's innocent.
He's more than innocent. He was a strong supporter of Mary.
From these new letters, do you get the feeling that there's information being planted somehow by conversation or other means to try and expose this covert channel somehow, or that it would come out elsewhere in a letter or a conversation, casual conversation, and Walsingham would be watching as to who was talking? I just wondered if there was a feeling of information being planted to Mary that she puts in these letters that Walsingham would have been able to see where the plant had been. He was trying to unearth a mole within either Shrewsbury's household, because that's
but Walsingham actually was the one to plant moles, so he didn't need to unearth any mole. So I don't think that something like that would have happened. And but we know that Mary Stuart was very, very careful about communication security. She took great efforts to even to hide the existence of a covert communication channel. For example, she would ask Castelnau, please write to me about this and this next week in the encoded one, and in parallel do that also with the official channel, so that when someone finds out I know about it, then they will assume it has been sent by the official channel, because otherwise Schwarzenegger could ask, where is that information coming from and how did Mary receive this? So from time to time she asked Castelnau to take such measure, and even she writes to Castelnau in one of the letters that via the official channel, she's not going to write anything that she wouldn't want even her worst enemy to be able to read. So from time to time, she was actually writing stuff in the official channel with the purpose of being seen by Walsingham and the council.
I feel that sort of tells me that she's actually quite content about the security of the tightness of this covert channel.
Yes, until mid-83, when she warns, she had some other intelligence sources, and she started to sense that this channel is probably not as secure as it was, and she warns Castelnau that he might have a spy in the embassy, and she's right. She has no proof. So but in the year before 83, definitely she relied on that channel, and it was a lifeline for her.
So the Throckmorton plot, which explodes in 83, I mean that is, the name Throckmorton comes up in various aspects of Elizabeth's diplomatic cards, because there's a Throckmorton who's an ambassador, but of course this Throckmorton, of course, is a Catholic, and very much in Mary's camp. And those letters, and the severity of Throckmorton's punishment and the other plotters is really quite horrifying. And is there any comment in any of these?
Yes, there is a very interesting comment. First of all, Francis Throckmorton was very important for Mary, because he became one of her trusted messenger carrying letters in and out her residence or prison, and he was allowed to come and see her because she could have a visitor. And we know that he visited her, they met, and he carried letter for her. But if you look at the letter, there is nothing about the Throckmorton's plot in those letters. So there could be two meanings. One, that she was just too careful to put anything in writing, but she was involved and she didn't put anything in writing. Or maybe she was not involved too much, or maybe she was involved, but with the Spanish ambassador, and then she didn't want anything to transpire to the French ambassador. But we know she was in close contact with Throckmorton, so everything is possible. And then when he was arrested and tortured, and then in one of the letters, she writes to Castelnau that she really deplores his fate, and if she can in the future, she will reward him and compensate him. But of course, he's being executed, so she has no occasion for that.
And yet, when the Babington plot is exposed, that cipher is much simpler than the one she's been using.
Yes. So basically, after the Throckmorton plot, she was not directly incriminated, but she was highly suspected of having taken part in that plot. So after a while, she was moved from the Earl of Shrewsbury to another place, and in that place, she went into two different places, but then she was in much worse conditions, and she was under tighter control. She had less access to the external world, and she became more and more desperate.
Did she have her secretary now with her?
Yes, he was with her, but still he couldn't. She didn't have the access to the external world that she had before. And then I think we think she became desperate and took more risk, like getting herself involved in the plot. Like this plot was not very strongly planned or organized, and also writing about the plot in letters, which she didn't do with the Throckmorton plot.
No, she didn't. No.
So and then as you rightly said, even the code that they use was not a very secure one. So you are involved in a plot, you write about it in a code which is not very safe. This shows that she was less careful at the time and more desperate, probably.
One of the things which you say in the paper, that there are 120 people listed in there. I mean, my area of research is into people like Nicholas Hilliard, and I wondered whether his name had come up, because I know that she gives Ralph Sadler a token of her appreciation, because she also considers he is a nice man. And we know that Ralph Sadler received a Hilliard miniature. Did you come across his name at all in any of
Ralph Sadler?
No, well, both Ralph Sadler and also Nicholas Hilliard.
No, those names don't come across. No.
Oh,
we have about 120 names, different names mentioned. Some of them are very well known. Some of them they are not known, and they appear only in that source. So that would be also interesting to find out who they were.
Yeah, right. Well, gosh, this is leaving a huge amount of new research for students and people like John Guy and other researchers and experts in the Elizabethan story of the relationship between Elizabeth I and Mary Stuart. And your paper is packed with all of this tantalizing information that will keep us going for years and years and years to come. Now, are there any plans to publish a book of the transcriptions of the letters?
Yes, of course. And this is a task that for which we cannot do by ourselves, because we are not historians. So we are now trying to partner with historians to do that. And there is a lot of material, so it's probably going to be a team effort, and people that are more familiar with specific aspects. So you have so many threads, so many stories, so many events that you need expertise on each one of them. And right now we are being contacted by some scholars that are willing to look at specific aspects. So this is definitely that will be a task for the next future, and we are.
That could run into several volumes.
No, I think I mean it depends. I mean, if it's just a text, that would be a book, and if it's the text plus translation plus interpretation, it could be 2 volumes. Well, I don't think that's will be. It's not going to be a new Labanov. It's going to be 1 or 2 volumes of Labanov.
Right.
Labanov have 7 volumes. I think we'll have 1 or 2.
Gosh. And the other thing is the story of how the 3 of you actually stumbled on it. I mean, that in itself, I think, would make a wonderful story and a book and a film and anything, because it's a very romantic, if you like, event that's happened as the discovery of these lost letters. And, you know, Netflix stars, do they call? Are they knocking on your door yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm being contacted by documentary producers, but I don't think that the story will be, the story will be probably Mary and what we learned from her, and that's much more interesting, I think.
Well, Dr. Lasry, thank you ever so much for your time. And I look forward to being able to read these letters in full. And I've got a young student, in fact, who's just started history, and he's fascinated by your discovery, so I shall be sending him a copy of that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Tudors Dynasty Podcast. You can follow and support the Tudors Dynasty Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon @Tudors Dynasty.